3, 2, 1.
What's going on, everybody? I'm your Uncle John, and this is Bourbon and Things. So, of course, on Bourbon and Things, we're going to sip on some bourbon, and then we're going to talk about some things. My guest today, Josh, went to Yellowstone recently, so that is the topic of the day. We're going to talk about his adventures in Yellowstone. After we, of course, let him introduce himself, and we introduce our bourbons, then we'll get to the trip. All right. So go ahead and tell everyone about yourself. You know who you are, what you do. Where are you within the Metro Atlanta?
Okay.
If you don't mind, for my own personal knowledge. And then yeah, anything else you want to shout out, like you said, your bourbon vibes or anything else like that.
For sure. Yeah. So I was big into the beer industry probably roughly like 2 years ago, and I did a lot of trading of beers, that type of stuff. And to me, the industry kind of became like stagnant. A lot of the same beers, everybody started brewing the same stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I was getting, like West Coast IPAs and that type of stuff, all of a sudden you had all these breweries in Atlanta that was making the same thing. So it was like, I was always down to represent the home team, right? So I just started buying their stuff and drinking their stuff. So it was like, man, I really want to do something different. In bourbon, I had drank bourbon before, and it interests me just because it's super unique. And, from bottle to bottle is unique. So it's not, you can go buy one bottle of just some stuff I'm sitting here beside me, an E.H. Taylor small batch, for instance. But from bottle to bottle, that bottle tastes different, right? So that intrigued me a lot. So it was like, I kind of started diving deep into that and kind of got away from the beer scene. So I was brewing beer and doing that type of stuff,
Let me ask you, homebrew or not to start to interrupt, but homebrew or actually?
Yeah, homebrew. So I was wanting to start my own brewery. So I had this thing called OTP, which was outside the perimeter brewing. So I was doing my own homebrew stuff and that type of stuff. But then, like I said, beer just kind of became boring, right? Because it felt like, to me anyways, everybody was kind of doing the same thing. So yeah, I got into bourbon, man. And just, like I said, it was so unique, and you could get bottle, like I said, from bottle to bottle was so different. So I started doing some trading with people with stuff you couldn't get in Georgia, or, allocated bottles, that type of stuff. And it's kind of a rabbit hole, right? Like it's kind of like a never ending type of scenario. It's always changing. Like I said, the bottles from bottle to bottle changes. Yeah. So it's wild just where that goes. So yeah, so that's kind of me, man. I live in Snellville, Georgia.
Oh, okay. You live in Gwinnett.
I'm not too far out. I'm in Gwinnett County.
In Gwinnett, yeah.
Yeah, I'm about 45 minutes from downtown. Gotcha. 30 minutes from Decatur, which is a great spot. Okay. But yeah, so that's kind of me.
So I live in Kennesaw. So I live on the other northern side, right, going towards Tennessee, not towards North Carolina.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Did you ever go, as you were getting into beer? So did you ever hang out a lot of Pontoon or Monday night brewing? Like, what kind of spots did you hang out?
Yeah. So I hung out at Comforts a lot in Athens.
Okay.
So literally, if you're familiar with Snellville, it's funny. I always tell people I'm 45 minutes from everywhere, right? Because my home is literally 45 minutes from downtown. It's 45 minutes from Athens. So it's
true.
45 minutes from Kennesaw, right? So I'm literally in the middle of everything. But yeah, I hung out at Creatures a lot. And then I tried to mingle with a lot of the smaller guys, like Jekyll, kind of before Jekyll started getting well known. Hung out with those guys. Wild Heaven, kind of before those guys kind of got on the scene. And again, it goes on and on and on. There's so many of these small guys that were small at one time that are kind of big now, or known in Atlanta that wasn't always known.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Okay. So now knowing that, do you have plans to get into bourbon? Like, you're gonna get a little special kind of things you're trying to work on in that area?
Yeah. So we got a lot of stuff going on out here, man. And it's weird because Snellville it's a big town, but there's a lot of chain stuff here and not a lot of mom and pop stuff.
Right.
So, trying to bring it back to this hometown feel here. I was born and raised in Loganville, Georgia, which is only about 15 minutes from Snellville.
Right.
My wife was born and raised in Snellville. So just trying to introduce that small town feel here. We got a thing that's coming to town. It's called the Grove. They're getting ready to build right now. We're gonna look. I hope to do something in there. I would like to do something in there. Yeah. So
Okay. So is it like an outdoor kind of play, live kind of thing? Like
correct. Yep. Yeah, it's
Okay.
the same thing that's kind of going on in all the small towns, right?
I
All these
got
small
it.
towns are now building these live, work, play type spots. So
Got it. Like, because I know like Marietta Square is like crazy booming with all that kind of vibe right now. Like, I don't know if you've been up that way, but Woodstock is doing the same thing where like now, like the city downtown Woodstock is like an actual place to go hang out. There's Reformations is up there. Um,
correct.
and then there's a couple bars and restaurants or whatever. So I totally get that. Kennesaw, of course, is doing this thing. We got a couple breweries over there. There's Hornell. There is where I'm Dry County. Of course, that's beer and spirits.
Correct.
And then I forgot there's a couple more. There's another distillery right up the street from Dry County. I forgot the name of it, but yeah. So are you gonna get your hands on that short barrel 15?
I sure hope so.
Okay, I'm planning on too. I told him to hold me one because I'm like, yo, I gotta get it.
Yeah. So
All right.
it's funny.
Huh?
I actually the company I work for, I'm actually based out of Kennesaw.
Oh,
So I'm right off of Barrett Park Drive. So I'm right there, kind of in the mix of everything. So I'm in that area all the time. Yeah.
well, let me know when you in the way. You
For
out
sure.
the way. We
Yeah.
can just
Now that I
stop
know,
by, man.
I'm out there basically 3 days a week. So Tuesday
Yeah,
through
man.
Thursday, I'm out in that area. Yeah. So Woodstock, all the way up to like Calhoun, Rome, that whole territory. So yeah, that's where I work at.
Okay, cool. Just let me know. Like I said, I'm typically home a lot, most times. So, and I got plenty of juice to share. So please let me know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. For
Or, you
sure.
know what I mean? We can go stop by somewhere else. So go ahead and share with everyone what are you going to sip on today. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so
So,
obviously we were talking about Yellowstone, right? I just made a trip out there. So when we flew into Bozeman, Montana, I did a quick Google search as to the closest distillery that was to where we was at, and
right.
we came up with this distillery called Wild Rye. So they're
Wild Rye.
out of
What up,
Bozeman,
Brian?
Montana.
Okay.
So
Right.
yeah, based right out of Bozeman, Montana. They do a little bit of everything in house.
Okay.
So we drove there from the airport and hung out with the distiller for a couple of hours. It was midday, so there wasn't a lot going on other than he was in there working. So super chill spot, small place, but real cool vibes, man. The distiller was a cool guy, nice enough to stop what he was doing, come over and just kind of chat with us and hang out with us and kind of let us know what they were about.
That's always cool.
So yeah, it was interesting, man. So the distiller had been on for a couple of years, but he was kind of telling us the backstory of the place. And the owners that decided to start this place was actually in the they were in the farm industry.
Okay.
So they were growing corn every year.
All right.
And at the end of the year, they had all this corn left over that didn't sell or kind of outdated itself, and they couldn't do anything with. And all of them were bourbon drinkers. So they would sit around at the end of the year and burn that leftover corn and drink whiskey. And it kind of went from there. And they was like, man, why are we burning this stuff when we can make our own whiskey?
Sell it. Right.
Exactly. So what are we doing here, right? Like,
Right,
we're burning this stuff when we could be making the stuff that we like to drink. So it's pretty cool. But so it's 51% corn, as your normal, typical Kentucky bourbon would be, Kentucky whiskey would be. But they use sweet corn because that's what they're.
It is different.
So it kind of, the nose on it's a little different than your regular bourbon would be.
Right.
The taste is obviously a little different, but the sweet corn actually makes it really smooth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little different, than your typical Kentucky style bourbon. But yeah.
Gotcha. I was at the distillery fairly recent. I can't remember which one, but they use sweet corn. It was a smaller distillery, and they use sweet corn, and that was one of the main differences that they pointed out. Was like, hey, like we use sweet corn,
Right,
which gives it a different kind of note where it's smooth, and you can actually taste the sweetness versus using the traditional high fructose corn syrups corn. You know what I mean? Like there was a difference. There was definitely a difference. What's going on, everybody? So we are just catching up on the bourbons that we are drinking. So he just talked about his bourbon. What was the name of that one more time?
it's just bourbon whiskey, but the name of the brewery, or the name of the distillery, is Wild Rye.
Wild Rye.
Out of Bozeman, Montana.
There we go. And then I'm gonna sip on Bardstown's Discovery number 3, right? So they recently just did a number 4. This is the number 3. Number 3 is about 50% ABV, so it's pretty, pretty strong. Nice little amount of heat, and they kind of favor the high rye kind of feel. So theirs are blended, so it's kind of cool. Like I went to their distillery, which I'm gonna do like a review on that sometime in the next month or two. But like, so I went to their distillery in Kentucky or whatever, and it was pretty nice, man. Like the cool thing was how they paired food with their bourbons, and like it was a really big deal. And then also how like behind the scenes they got like they're making a lot of other people's bourbons too, so they're kind of becoming like the MGP of bourbon as well. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, I definitely had grabbed this. I'm gonna sip on this for this episode. Yeah. Have you tried this one before?
I have not had that one. Nope.
All right. Well, there it is. That's the one you got to try when you come through. So for those of you who haven't seen the bottle, and they keep everything right there on the paper because they're still fairly young. They blend, right? So they blend with a couple of other aged barrels or whatnot. Their actual in-house bourbon is still kind of young, but in the next couple of years, they're going to switch to just their own juice as they kind of like catch up.
Okay.
As their bourbon ages and it gets to, I think they said they're waiting to like the 6-year mark or something like that.
Okay.
What they're waiting for, I believe. But anyway, it's a beautiful place, man. They're like the Napa Valley of bourbons up there, so it's really, really nice. And the people are really cool. So yeah. So cheers. And then yeah, man. So go ahead and tell us about Yellowstone. It's crazy enough, like after I talked to you about it, I've run into several other people that said, yeah, like they went. And so like now all these experiences about Yellowstone is like coming up. Some of the kids that I trained, their family went like maybe about a month ago.
Okay.
They flew out there and hiked a little bit and I guess, did some camping stuff. So tell me that's how did you even plan this out? What came to mind? Why did you decide to go to Yellowstone out of all places?
So it's kind of a funny story. Couple of months back, me and one of my buddies was sitting out back. We had a bonfire going. It was still cool outside, drinking some bourbon. And we were talking about his birthday was coming up. And I was like, man, what are you doing for your birthday? And he was like, man, I don't know. He was like, I might just fly out to Montana and get me a steak. I hear they have some good steaks out there. And I was like, interesting. I was like, man, I've always wanted to go to Yellowstone. And so literally in about a 4-hour time span, we went from talking about this to about 24 hours later booking a trip.
Wow. Okay.
So it all happened real fast. We were kind of talking about it. And then I called him the next morning and I was like, man, were you serious about that? And he was like, yeah, I was serious about that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to put this thing together and send it over to you. So the next day I kind of got online, started checking spots out, kind of what would be the best direction if you were going to spend, 4 to 5 days in Yellowstone. What would be the best direction and how could you see the most in a short time period? So, we started kind of checking dates that was close to his birthday, which was May 17th.
Okay.
So we were like, man, let's kind of put this together as to how this would look. So the west entrance actually doesn't open till sometime mid-April, right? So if you're going to fly into Bozeman, Montana, which is basically the closest entrance or the closest airport to the west entrance, that's kind of the entrance you would go into.
First of all, I don't know nothing. All right. So how many entrances are there? Right.
Right.
And then so what's the importance of the entrances? Like getting explain that.
So you basically have a north entrance, which is semi close to Bozeman, Montana. That would be basically the closest airport. You have a west entrance, which the closest airport would also be Bozeman. Then you have a south entrance, which would be like Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then you have an east entrance, which is kind of way off. Okay. So we were trying to figure out, I mean, obviously, right, if you're going to Yellowstone, the one place everybody knows is like Old Faithful, right? Like growing up, everybody knows what Old Faithful is. So like, hey, I want to see Old Faithful at some point, right? So
I just know Yogi Bear. Honestly, that's
or yeah, yeah. So,
that's about it for me. Okay, gotcha. Oh,
but I was
the
like,
guy.
man, one thing I just felt like that's like, that's kind of like one of the natural wonders in the U.S., right? Is Old
Right,
Faithful. So
right,
I
right.
was like, man, where's that at compared to where could we fly in at to kind of see this thing? So after a little bit of research, a couple hours online, you kind of figure out that Bozeman, Montana, is kind of the airport to fly into if you want to see Yellowstone. Um, so we flew into Bozeman, Montana, got a rental car. We
Mhm.
left there, so it's interesting. Obviously, coming from like Atlanta, where there's all these roads and stuff. Out there, there's only a few roads. So
Wow.
basically, everything is kind of an in or out of. Everything's kind of based around Yellowstone, right? Like that's kind of their tour.
Thing. That's it.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's kind of their tourist trap, right? So we realized we could leave Bozeman and drive down to a place called Big Sky, Montana.
Okay.
So Big Sky is it's a ski resort town.
Hmm.
So like if you go up on the mountain, it's a ski resort, and when you leave there, they have like a village where there's like hotels and bars and food and that type of stuff, which is about 45 minutes from Bozeman, Montana. So we decided our first night we was like we'll stay in Big Sky because so from Big Sky, Montana, on the same road that you're on, it's about 45 minutes down to the west entrance to Yellowstone. So yeah, we stayed in Big Sky, Montana the first night. Got up, left there, and went down to West Yellowstone the next morning and entered the park. And so basically, the park is kind of divided in what I would call like a south loop and a north loop.
Okay.
So you have the south loop basically where you enter and go south, which will take you down toward like the south entrance / the Grand Tetons.
What? So let me. And sorry to interrupt, but like, so when
Yeah,
you come in there, is there like a park ranger and park ranger deputy, and they come out with their big hat on and say, there's a cost, there's a fee, there's these rules. Like, how does that work?
yeah. So I actually booked it online, right? Before you get there, you can pay online. It's like $35 will give you a 3-day entrance to the park,
Okay.
right? Basically, the park's open whenever you get there. It doesn't. I mean, we would get there at like 7 a.m. and the park would be open.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so when you enter into West Yellowstone, once you pull up to like the visitor gate, you pull up. You kind of show them your ID, just like if you was going to say like an Atlanta United game, you got a barcode on your phone, they scan it, they let you
Okay.
in. At that point in time, they'll give you a map that'll kind of show you all the stops along the way that you could possibly see, right? So obviously, like I said, we wanted to check out Old Faithful, and everyone says Old Faithful's like one of the busiest places in the park. So we was like, well, we'll get there early in the morning so we can kind of go down and check this out before it gets crowded, right? So we went down, checked out Old Faithful, got to see that whole thing, which again is very touristy, um, and it's one of honestly, it's one of the few places in the park that is very touristy.
Okay. What makes it touristy,
But
right? Like, I mean, it is in the middle of a national park, so what makes it touristy?
yeah. So you're in the middle of a national park, but like like literally within walking distance of Old Faithful, you have like um, what do they call it? It's like basically a shop that would be like a
Uh,
Yellowstone shop. So they sell like T-shirts and
okay.
mugs, the
Merch.
typical touristy stuff. You know what I mean? Where they're trying to get your money. Um, so
Still your
it's
picking the
kind of like a
baskets.
tourist. It's kind of
All
like a
right.
tourist trap, really. So Old Faithful goes off technically on the hour. So like between an hour and 15 minutes, it goes off and it does its thing, right? It sprays the water, being the geyser that it is. Um, but is what I didn't realize in all of this, to get from the west entrance down to Old
Oh,
Faithful, which is roughly a 45-minute drive if you're just kind of heading straight down,
okay.
um, you will pass several hundred geysers, right?
So there's a whole bunch on the way.
Yeah, so everywhere you go, you could stop like every quarter of a mile, and there's smoke coming out of the ground, right? Because
Okay.
these geysers are kind of letting steam off.
Right.
Which I didn't really know that was going to be the case.
So did
Yeah,
you do
so
the man thing and be like, man, I ain't waiting in no lines and driving another hour to get to this. Let me just pull over and get my shot right here and call it a
yeah,
day.
exactly, literally. So like, you pull
Okay.
over and you're like, I'm gonna take a couple of pictures. This is cool. There's one geyser, so you kind of take the picture of that, and then you drive, I don't know, a mile or two, and then you're like, there's a whole field of these things,
Mm.
right? So like kind of before you get to Old Faithful, even though all of them's not, Old Faithful's the one that sprays water, 100 to 150 foot out of the ground. So it's the one that's going to erupt and send, again, it's a tourist trap, right? Like, I hate to say that, and it's a national park and it's a national treasure and all this stuff, but it is what it is.
Right.
They built an economy around that.
Right. Right.
So, but it's just funny though, they don't tell you about all this stuff getting down to Old Faithful. So, you kind of see all this stuff along the way. And then you get down to Old Faithful, and like I said, this thing, it literally, whenever you get to Old Faithful, they have like a whiteboard outside with like a mat, like the eraser marker written on it with the time slots as this thing's going to erupt.
Okay.
So if you get there at 9 and this thing says it's going to erupt at 10 or 10:15, what are you going to do? You going to sit there for an hour? No, like most people, you're going to walk over to the shop, right?
Right.
You're
Right.
going to
Right.
buy yourself a T-shirt. You're going to buy yourself,
Right.
a water jug or whatever. So of course that's what we did. And it was funny because when we planned the trip, it was like, oh, I want to see Old Faithful, which, don't get me wrong, was really cool. It was
Sure.
to see in person, it was neat. But leaving there and going south, like going toward down. So if you leave there, you'll head towards Lake Yellowstone,
Okay.
right? So that was kind of like the next big thing on the map. So we
What
was
about
like,
the
oh,
Grand
we'll head
Canyon?
down there and check that out.
What
What's
about the
that?
Baby Grand Canyon or something like that? I was reading that's a thing, Baby Grand Canyon or something like that.
So
Did
that's
you?
kind of up north.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we'll get to there. Yeah, we go there for sure.
Oh, okay.
But we head south, and then one of the neat things was, and like I said, this was in May, May 17th. Actually, it was probably May 18th, somewhere along those days, 17th, 18th. We crossed over the Continental Divide in Yellowstone, which was really neat. So that's the highest point in Yellowstone.
Okay.
It's roughly 8,400 feet in elevation.
Did
And
you hike that? Did you take an ATV?
no, you could drive there. You could.
Oh, you drove. Okay.
Yeah. So we did some hiking for sure, but whenever we left where Old Faithful is to drive south down toward Lake Yellowstone, you cross over the Continental Divide. So you can stop, get out, and check it out, that type of thing. Like I said, you're roughly at 8,400 feet in elevation.
So
this is May, and at this time, I'm going to say there's 3 to 4 feet of snow on the ground.
So real quick
Right?
though,
So
was the roads really like narrow? Were they crazy? Was it like really well constructed like roads?
No.
Or was it a problem?
Like super good paved roads, 2-lane
Okay.
roads everywhere you go, all the way down. Yeah. So like I said, they have Yellowstone. Actually, the layout's really nice because you kind of have a south loop that you can hit, and then they have a north loop that you can hit. Well, I wasn't really familiar with the north loop at all, right? Like all I knew was south because I wanted to see Old Faithful. So, like I said, we saw Old Faithful, which was cool, and then you cross over the Continental Divide, which was really neat. Like I said, mid-May, there's 3 to 4 feet of snow outside. The roads are clear. They've paved the roads. Everything's super clear. And then you kind of drop in elevation and you get down to Lake Yellowstone. So you can look like from Lake Yellowstone will take you toward the south entrance, which is where the Grand Tetons are at. Mm-hmm. And Lake Yellowstone is still completely frozen. So we checked all that out. And again, this is kind of a loop, right? So you can travel the whole road. It's roughly say the south loop's roughly 200-ish, I don't know, probably between 175 and 200 miles round trip. We'll get you from the west entrance, do the full south loop back out to the west entrance, right?
Okay.
So we were like, man, we're here. It's early. Let's just do the whole loop. Like let's check it out. Like we're here. And so I will say for anyone that wants to go check out Yellowstone, I will say May was a fantastic month. The kids are still in school. So there's not a lot of tourists there at that time. It's fairly calm. You can kind of get out and cruise and do your own thing. As to where, like, I know now, if you follow any of the National Park Services online or anything like that, if you follow Yellowstone, you'll see the tourism's crazy right now.
Okay. Crazy. All right.
Yeah, it's super busy. Like right now is a busy time of year. So like May was a really good time to go, and we kind of lucked out with that. We didn't even know that. You know what I mean? It was just kind of luck of the draw. So yeah, we checked all that out, did the full loop. So on your way from the South Loop, once you kind of hit that and you start going back north, you'll come to the Baby Grand Canyon. And this is all the stuff that, like, if you haven't done any research, you really don't know anything about, right? Like there's all this stuff that along the way you hit, like there's probably, like when you get the map of Yellowstone, I'm going to say there's probably 150 to 200 stops that you can make along the way that you would have never known about. And unless you're looking at this map, right? Like that's waterfalls and all this type of stuff, just natural wonders.
And where are you guys sleeping at night? Are you sleeping in the vehicle? Or are you sleeping in a cabin? Next to Yogi, my friend. I like to reference Yogi because that was me growing up watching Yogi Bear. Like, where did you guys sleep?
Yeah. So that was one of the things. Like, we knew we was staying in West Yellowstone in the town that night.
Okay.
So we stayed in it was called Adventure Cabins. So it's like some small cabins
outside of the park or in the park.
Correct. Yeah. So literally, like, whenever you leave the park in any direction, there's places to stay within a quarter of a mile.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's set up for tourism, right? So, and in all of these places are small towns. So yeah, like I said, the first night we stayed in Big Sky, then we went down in West Yellowstone, stayed there. Like I said, checked out basically the South Loop, and then we stayed in these places called Adventure Cabins, which is a small cabin. Cool spot though. Your typical what you would expect of almost like going to the mountains and staying. So like kind of a small western still town. Couple of bars in town, where you could drink some local beer, that type of stuff.
Did they have good bourbon?
No.
Absolutely
not. I wouldn't even say they had good beer.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Like, but it's cold, so you drink it. You know what I mean?
Okay. And the food? How about food? Food?
Actually, so some really good food.
Okay, cool. I can live with that.
So out west, if you're ever out west, you'll notice there's a lot of like elk. There's a lot of bison.
Bison. Yeah.
So bison is a big thing out there. Elk's a big thing out there. So you will eat a lot of that just being out there, right? Like if you walk into a place and there's burgers, typically it's going to be an elk burger or a bison burger. And that's just simply due to, their.
Could you taste the difference between elk and bison? Like, if you go to Ted Montana's Grill in Atlanta versus like getting, bison up there, is there a difference in the taste? Did you notice any difference in the meat? Or was it like all the same because you was hungry and you was out?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. So I will say if you eat elk or bison, like, it's obviously fresh out there. It's not a lot of shipped processed stuff. A lot of it's so going to small restaurants out there. A lot of the places will tell you like what farm it came from in Montana.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. So
that's cool.
Most of the stuff you're eating is fresh, non-processed, like elk or bison. So, typically it's like going to a good restaurant in Atlanta. It tastes fresh. It tastes clean.
Okay.
So yeah, good food. Yeah, the food was actually better, I would say, than the drinks out there.
Nice. Okay. Well, I'm assuming that you brought your own, personal stash for backup just in case.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So one of my like I said, the guy that went with me, it was his birthday on the 17th, and we knew we was staying in West Yellowstone that night. So his favorite bourbon is Lost Prophet 22 year.
Ooh.
I don't know if you've ever had a Lost Prophet, but
No, but it sounds expensive.
yeah. So check out Lost Prophet. A lot of what they do, they go in and buy barrels from companies that basically have either sat or they're not going to. They haven't had a chance yet to kind of put them, in bottle and that type of stuff. So they'll go
Right.
in and buy, a barrel or two barrels or something like that. But they call it Lost Profit because it's kind of a one-time deal, right? Because everything they're buying is they're buying from someone else, whether it's Buffalo Trace or whoever it's from. They're buying these barrels,
Right.
but it's his favorite bourbon, man. So
So
like the first night we was out there, he bought he. What's that?
no, go ahead.
Yeah, so he brought a bottle of that. So, we dug into that second night we was out there. We met a cool couple when we was at the cabins that night. The dude worked for the Justice Department and through COVID decided to quit his job. Because he decided that, he was living his life wrong, or, he had kids and he was kind of missing out on what they was doing because he was traveling a lot.
Sure.
So he was from East Texas, and they bought a home virtually online in Anchorage, Alaska, and he was going up there to start his own law firm. So they was on a 51-day trip. Yeah. So they was on a 51-day trip, him and his wife and 3 kids, from East Texas to Anchorage, Alaska.
That's crazy.
So, man, we sat around a campfire and had probably 12 glasses of bourbon with this dude. And it was really cool just hearing his story. You know what I mean? Just kind of someone that literally took a chance, right? There's not a lot of people that you will talk to ever that have a good, stable job that are willing to take a chance on life like that.
Especially when you get kids involved.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That's
most of us get comfortable in what we got going on, and, we feel stable, and, we do the human thing and kind of fall in line, and that's just what we do.
Wow, that's tough. Could he handle his bourbon?
What's that?
Could could him and his wife or his partner handle their bourbon?
Yeah. So, man, some of the coolest people ever, man. Obviously, like I said, they're from Texas, man. So they were, that he was into bourbon. He was a bourbon drinker. His wife, not so much. She wasn't into bourbon, but he was a bourbon drinker, man. So, to sit there and have bourbon, me, myself, I'm not, I'm a fairly, basic kind of individual, so to sit there and have bourbon with someone that literally 2 weeks ago was working for the Justice Department, and traveling the country with the Justice Department was pretty interesting, right? Obviously his knowledge were way outside of mine. So it was cool though. Just meeting people like that along the way, and having conversations with real people was almost the best part of the trip.
Right.
Talking to locals and then talking to people that you met along the way, kind of what are you doing here type scenario, So yeah, that was neat.
My man Tequila Lovers Anonymous said he's drinking that Jack Daniels. He just posted on it. I wanted to tell him I actually really enjoy that Jack Daniels Barrel Proof. That one actually is one of my favorite Jack Daniels.
Okay.
To truth be told, I like that better than the Gold. I definitely like it better than Eric Church. It has a nice little bite to it. It's very full bodied. That's that when that one actually hits the spot. But yeah, back to the trip. I know we're getting ready to wrap it up. You can tell me one more story. I know you got to go. So
yeah. So I will say, man, if anybody gets a trip to go, or a chance to go out there, if you leave North Yellowstone, so like I said, if you look at it on a map, there's kind of a full loop you can do from Bozeman down to a small town called Gardner, Montana, which is in North Yellowstone. And we'll exit you out the north side of the park. So the last night we were there, man, there's this place called Dreamcatcher TP Hotel, right? So we was like, oh, that'd be interesting. So yeah, the last night we was there, man, we stayed in teepees outside of North Yellowstone.
Okay.
Super cool. So basically everything in this place, there was electricity and stuff like that, but at night this place, like the owner would come out. His name was Rick, super nice guy. Set out like a campfire, that type of stuff. Bring out beers for everyone. Bring out wine for the people that didn't like beers. Bring out s'mores for the kids, that type of stuff. And you kind of hang out around this campfire and just get to know people from all walks of life, right?
What
like,
about pipe? You didn't get no
whoever's
pipe.
staying in the place.
You know, you didn't get
What's
a
that?
pipe, a pipe or something like that with, you know, a little TP magic. Like, what, you know, no, none of that.
Yeah, no TP magic, you know, but we brought our own stuff. You know, depending on where you fly into, some things are legal, some things aren't, you know, that type of thing.
Understood. We ain't got to go into that. Got it. Understood. Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, man. So we sat around this campfire and met people literally from all walks of life, you know, which was really interesting. But one of his things was about, so out there, it's interesting. They're in the mountain time zone. The sun doesn't set, and again, this is in May. The sun didn't set till about 10:30 p.m.
Oh, that's crazy.
So it stayed bright for a long, long time, right? So like, you're outside at 9 o'clock with a campfire, and the sun's still out.
Yeah.
But about 11:30ish to midnight, it kind of finally got dark outside.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no light pollution. So the stars were just unreal at this place.
It's beautiful. Okay.
But you know, you talk about elk and bison and that type of stuff. So you're staying in these teepees, right? And there's a fence around the place, but each individual teepee had like a little campfire outside that you could light, that was on like natural propane. Well, you could, like, we sat outside till like 2 o'clock in the morning, just chilling, you know, having some drinks, just hanging out. And the elk and bison are just walking through this place, right? Like within like reaching distance. Like, it was unbelievable, man. Yeah, no, it was cool. Yeah. So they do it, and I talked to the guy the next morning. He said they do it every single night.
So they hang out with the elk and the buffalo and bison. Just they like, you can just slap them on the butt. They so close.
Every night.
Hey, okay, all right. Oh,
Yeah.
Let me ask you one last question. Did you what dangerous animals did you see, if you saw any?
So there's a place, if you go up north, and kind of head toward, if you go north and head east, on the main road in Yellowstone, you can go to a place called Lamar Valley. And we had talked to some people when we was south, and we was like, hey, if we wanted to see a bear, where would you go? And they was like, go toward Lamar Valley and hang out. So we did, man. We got up that early that next day, went up toward Lamar Valley and hung out and got to see a bear in the wild, which was really, really neat experience. You know, that's something that most people will never experience, to see a bear just running around wild, not in captivity.
There's a guy who posted on the post, and he's a photographer, and so he was saying like how he's going to be uploading some of his pictures, but he saw about like 30 or 40 bears, I don't know, something like that on his recent trip. And he was like, yeah, they just, you know, and I didn't post that. He was like, I didn't post that many of them. I was like, yo, that's crazy. You know, John doesn't play with bears. You know what I mean? Like I said, as good as it gets is Yogi Bear, and that's about it. Did you see the video of the girl who saved her dogs from the bear? And she like,
I did see that. Pushed the bear like a ball.
Yeah, she hit him with a Derrick Henry. You know what I mean? Like, she stepped on him off the wall. Yeah, so it's crazy. That's crazy. Well, anyway, thank you for everybody for joining in. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up because my man got some stuff to do. But he's definitely welcome back at any time. Obviously, we had a pretty good time, and this is just a little introduction. So I want to thank you, Josh, for jumping on the show. If you've got anything else you want to say to people, please do. You got anything you want to say?
I would just say, man, thanks for having me. This was fun, man. This was my first live, going live like this, so I appreciate you for having me on.
Hey, man. Yeah, it was good. You did well, man. I think you definitely need to have me on yours.
These lives in person.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you. Granted, it's going to be on the weekend because Snellville traffic to Kennesaw is like crazy during the weekday, which you already know. Right. But we'll have to figure something out and do something live. And I think that's a completely good idea. That's dope. So anyway, all right. Thanks everybody for jumping on, and I will see you guys next time. So make sure you sip safely and have a great week. Now it's time to check out this game. See the Bucks versus the Hawks, baby. All right.